Okay, thank you, Group 4, for that presentation. Let's take a closer look. So the first one was about the transition from silent to sound. Group 4 mentioned that it's because the two kinds of films required different styles of acting, and that sound films also required some more limitations. So yes, it's true, the acting styles are very different. If we think of films as a kind of communication, silent films don't have natural sound, so they have to make up for that loss or that lack with other things. And so, as Group 4 mentioned, often silent film acting was quite exaggerated to make sure you caught the point. And they couldn't rely on sound effects, so instead they had to use things like lighting, editing, camera angles, or actor reactions, and things like that. Whereas, especially the early days of sound films, as we saw in this film, the technology was just beginning, so they had to adjust their acting to the technology. So they gained the ability to use voice and sound, but they lost the complete freedom of movement and complete freedom of using the space. But there's also another thing that Group 4 didn't really talk about, which is when you now have sound, you actually have to pick and choose what kind of sound. Just like when you have a silent movie, you have to pick and choose your angle and how wide the image is. When you have sound, you have to choose what sounds to include and what not to include. So the most obvious example is, of course, Lena's voice, which uh, it is very unsuitable to her image as like a beautiful, gorgeous woman. Her voice does not sound gorgeous. But aside from that, even the background noises, right? Let's take a look at this scene where they try sound films for the first time and it doesn't go well. Pay attention to the sound effects. So aside from what they say, you'll notice also lots of unnecessary sound effects, right? The pearls, the sound of the leather boots that Don is wearing, like when Lena hits him with the fan, it sounds incredibly loud. Today's sound films don't have this problem because we have sound editors. We pick and choose what kind of sounds we want to include, and we also have sound mixers. We adjust the volume for each individual sound to emphasize the important ones. But in the early days of sound films, they did not know about this yet. And so this is also partly why you can't just put silent film actors and a microphone and then make a sound movie. And then musicals are a different thing altogether, as Group 4 said, because musicals are featuring more exaggerated movements and also the sound is mainly music. So it doesn't seem to be affected that much by the limitations of sound films. But of course, there's a trick to this, right? Most musical films are not all music, such as this one. We have long scenes of talking, and then we have singing and dancing, and then talking, and then singing and dancing. So the talking parts are still subject to the same problems. But at least the singing and dancing, it's all music, right? Um, but even here, the use of sound is also very considered. So, for example, in this film, we have many scenes of tap dancing, right? They're tapping their feet on the ground, and the attraction of this kind of dancing is the sound. I don't know if you noticed this, but when they're doing tap dancing, and then like after one character is finished and they walk away, we don't hear their footsteps. Right? That's by design. Only when we're supposed to hear their feet on the ground do we hear them. But when we're not supposed to hear their feet, we don't hear them. So even here for musical films, there is some design element to the sound. Um, when we have a musical in the musical, right? When Don is explaining his idea about how they can begin with like a big Broadway number and it's very colorful and so that is a very it's one kind of musical. It is in fact a silent musical. And that's why that film within a film works so well. If you'll notice in that section, nobody talks. In fact, people barely sing. Basically, I think the only thing they sing is Gotta Dance, right? And everything else is just music and tap dancing. So even when they make a sound musical, it's very similar to a silent film. And so it also naturally allows for more exaggerated performances like the woman, the gangster woman, as Group 4 mentioned in question 5, um, is very seductive, provocative dancing style. They also had big, bold use of color and lighting and stage design and all of the supporting dancers making shapes on the stage. All of that is more fit to the logic of silent film. So the musical within this film works mainly because it follows silent film logic. So it fits into the story and it fits into our film, Singin' in the Rain. But if you think about actual musicals that we've had recently, such as La La Land or Pitch Perfect is also a musical. Musicals have changed from those early days of mostly being performance, and today it's more like a regular movie with performances and songs in the middle. If you think about it, most Disney movies are also musicals. We usually don't think of them that way. They feel like natural stories with more or less natural characters, but there's music in it, so it's a musical. So when we talk about musicals being relatively immune, we're actually talking about early musicals that are more similar to silent films. And then the third part, the effect on celebrity, as Group 4 mentioned, now that we are looking for different things in our movies and looking for different things in our celebrities, different people will become famous in different ways. Of course, the main example is Lena, right? She looks beautiful. She has great exaggerated acting, but her voice is simply terrible. And so in the era of sound films, she probably would not be famous. Um, but what Group 4 also mentioned in question 6 that all of this celebrity stuff is manufactured by Hollywood, right? These images are created. And we get a very clear reminder of this at the beginning of the film when Don is being interviewed and he talks about how he became famous. What he says does not fit what we see. And the implication is that what we see is the truth, and what he says is the manufactured image. So when he's saying like I always took on dignified roles, I was always a serious actor, and then we seeing him like falling around and getting hurt and singing and dancing and not being popular. So yes, it's true. From silent movies to sound movies, the logic of celebrity was now different. But at the same time, as Group 4 mentioned, Hollywood has always been about creating celebrity. It's always something by design. Of course, you have to have something in order to make it bigger. But very few people are simply big. There's always something behind it. The next question, gender play a part in the hierarchy of film set. As Group 4 pointed out, yes, most of the film crew and most of the creative people in making a film were and still are men. And so, like we saw in the film, when the actresses wanted to do something or didn't want to do something, often the men would disagree and the women would have to follow the men. Um, Especially the head of the studio is a man. The person who makes all of the decisions is a man. Even the other, like the directors, the actors have to uh, get his acceptance. So that is a very obvious point where gender does play a difference on a film set. And then when we think about musical numbers, singing and dancing, um, usually the women on stage are not the main character in the musical. There's a number called Beautiful Woman, right? Beautiful girl. It's one man in the middle singing about all the different kinds of beautiful girls. That's pretty obvious, right? So like, especially the first time we see these actresses, they are posing as models. And then in the group number later, they come down and they support the main man in the middle. So the gender of a film set hierarchy is quite obvious. It's a bit better today, but it's still a problem. And because, as Group 4 mentioned, because this is the culture that produces these films, the culture is often presented in the films as well. Unless you actively try to work against a patriarchal culture and values, if you don't think about it, the values you experience when making something will enter into the thing. So it is possible for a film set with mostly men to make a non-sexist film, and that's happening more and more. But it takes conscious work. In a patriarchal or just gender segregated society, um, everybody experience men, women, and other genders each experience social life differently. And we have to work to understand how other genders experience the same social life. So if you don't do the work, you don't understand how other genders experience society, and you make a film without thinking about those questions, the film will probably reflect your own social experiences. And that's the connection. That's the third part of this question. Number 3, is Lena a bad person? I think group 4 made a good point, right? Lena is in danger of losing her career, basically. You can say um, not everyone deserves to be famous. That's true. But we should also think about if Lena can no longer get any work as an actress, what would she do? Would she just be a silent model? Would she can't even, like today, when a celebrity is starting to lose their star power, maybe they would do some commercials, maybe they would go on talk shows or do a podcast or whatever. But Lena can't even do that because her voice, right? If she does a podcast, not able to listen to it. If she goes on a talk show, nobody wants to hear her talk. So like, what else could she do? It's no wonder she feels so threatened by the new situation. So yes, her actions are selfish, but you can also say that they are self-preserving. The second part is she a bad woman? Today, of course, we don't really make the distinction between these two questions, right? Uh, we don't really judge person and woman differently. But as group 4 mentioned on question 6, if we add some, or sorry, not question 6, at this question, the third part, group 4 mentioned that maybe when we consider these two questions and we ask, is Lena a bad woman, there might be some gender stereotypes added in. And I think that's probably why the film is able to make her the antagonist, the person who creates problems, because her actions are so against the stereotype for women. Group 4 also mentioned that um, studios prefer obedient women, right? So like Kathy, even though Kathy knows that being Lena's voice would not be good for her own career, she says that she is willing to help save Dawn's film first, and then she'll worry about her own career next. And so this is the kind of woman that film studios like to work with. Even today, the fastest way to kill an actress's career is to go talk to a newspaper and say that she is difficult to work with. But of course, just because somebody says that this woman is difficult to work with does not mean it's true. Maybe the work environment was bad for her and she's trying to stand up for herself. And that's exactly what's happening with Lena. She's trying to save her career, and she's doing it in, I think, a very logical way, right? In her position, she doesn't have many choices. So in terms of what a film studio expects of a woman, Lena is a bad woman. But in terms of being a person and her behavior, it's uh, quite logical and understandable, even if we may feel like we don't agree with her behavior. And it's not just an empty danger, right? Throughout film history, there have been many silent film actresses who were not able to transition into sound films and lost their career. I can't remember her name, but one famous actress actually, uh, in her old age, became very poor and had to work as a housekeeper. So this is a very real danger that Lena is facing. Question 4. Uh, so group 4 gave a pretty good answer to question 4. Why does Dawn say it will ruin her career? Basically, like if Kathy's voice is connected to Lena's face, it's harder for Kathy herself to present her own face, her own image in the future. But there's one part of this question that I wanted to emphasize before Lena agrees. Because what happens after Lena agrees? She says, she basically wants the studio to force Kathy to always be her voice as part of Kathy's contract. So a legal power to force Kathy into the shadows, into backstage. Before Lena agrees, Dawn already thinks this might be a problem, right? Kathy says, I can do it. Dawn says, what about your own career? It will ruin your career. And so the heart of this question is, even if Lena does not force Kathy to always be her voice, why could this be bad for Kathy's career? And I think the answer to this is the connection between a sound and a voice. In the silent era, there was no connection. That's why Lena could prosper. But in the sound era, especially at the beginning of the sound era, the voice was one of the main selling points. So if the first time Lena makes a sound movie, that voice is connected with Lena's face, then in the future, when people hear that voice, it becomes like a famous voice, right? People hear that voice, they think of Lena. And this is especially uh, significant in the early days. It's the first time people are hearing the voice of this celebrity. She's already famous. Everybody wants to hear what she sounds like. So it would be even harder for Kathy in the future to try to develop her own career using her own voice, because her voice would no longer belong to her. Today, this is less of a problem because we're so used to films having sounds, unless an actor has a very special voice. Otherwise, it's not often easy to distinguish between people's voices. And that's why, like, if you watch a cartoon or an animated movie, and each character has a voice actor, but very few voice actors become famous for themselves. Usually it's the other way around. You have a famous actor and you cast them as the voice of a character. And that makes the movie more noticeable. But voice actors, of course, voice actors a lot of them don't really care too much about being famous in the first place. That's why they do voices and not the whole acting. Um, but so today, the connection between voice and celebrity is not as strong. By the way, voice acting is not easy. Not like if you take a famous actor and you put them as the voice of a cartoon, often you can't tell the difference. But a truly good voice actor, even if you close your eyes, you can feel exactly what's going on in a scene. So it's not just anybody who can do that. For example, did you guys know that Taylor Swift once did an animated movie called The Lorax? It's a very popular children's book that got turned into an animated movie. She sounds terrible. Like she's a professional singer, but in that movie, her voice sounds like any other 20-something-year-old woman's voice. There's no acting in that at all, I have to say. So it is a specialty. And so I think Dawn knows this, right? Once Kathy's voice is connected to Lena's face, even without legal punishment, it would be hard for Kathy to reclaim the sound of her voice. Not impossible, but it would be hard. And if Kathy wanted to reclaim her voice without ruining Lena's career, that I think would be impossible. Number 5, how do the musical numbers and dances help to tell the story? Group 4 chose 3 of the main musical numbers and explained those numbers quite well, right? What are the characters feeling in that moment? How do they express those feelings through music and dance? All good. We can look at, so group 4 talked about Make 'em Laugh, Singing in the Rain, and Good Morning. We can look at some of the other numbers as well. So like when Dawn is wooing Kathy, right? They're alone on an empty soundstage, and he sings that beautiful romantic song. I don't know if you noticed this, but the actress playing Kathy, Debbie Reynolds, it felt like she was not a professional dancer. She's kind of being guided by Gene Kelly around the space. And so that reflects how it's Dawn chasing Kathy. And Kathy is kind of like hesitating, thinking about whether to accept. Another number is Moses Supposes. So this is when they've decided to do a sound movie and they have diction coaches teaching them how to talk, right? And then Don is having a lesson and his teacher keeps using tongue twisters, phrases that are hard to say. And then like Don and Cosmo take one of those phrases and turns it into a song, and then they dance and they use everyday objects to kind of tease the teacher. I think that's a good reflection of like when a student feels a lot of pressure and is feeling frustrated, how they want to express that feeling. They want to try to regain control over the teacher. And so that comes out in the performance when they kind of push the teacher around, they surround him with the curtains, they put him on a table. And then at the end, like Dawn is dancing and Cosmo tells the teacher to watch. And then they switch. Cosmo dances and Dawn tells the teacher to watch. It's kind of like saying, yes, you are an expert at pronunciation, but we can do something too, right? Look at what we can do. So that was also quite a good design there. Um, yeah, so and then we talked about the musical within the musical. We talked about how it's actually more like a silent film than a real musical. So yeah, so even though there are so many musical numbers in this film, they're designed to help tell the story and to help express how the characters feel and their relationship with each other. So on the one hand, yes, we can appreciate how well they can sing and dance, and that's kind of fun. But it's also interesting to note that it's not stopping the story. It's part of the story. And then question 6, does the film comment on its own production history and how? So group 4 took this question and talked about the general change from silent films to sound films. And that's fine. But we can look a bit closer at this film because Singin' in the Rain is a movie about movies and it's a musical about musicals. So supposedly, if it has some kind of attitude toward filmmaking or attitude toward making sound movies or musicals, then it would be talking about itself. So, for example, a big part of the film is the use of Kathy's voice for Lena's face. Well, in real life, the actress who plays Lena doesn't sound like that. That's part of her performance. And so when in the film, Lena talks with Kathy's voice or sings with Kathy's voice, sometimes we're hearing the voice of the actual actress playing Lena using her real voice. Usually because maybe Kathy couldn't sing up that high, or not Kathy, Debbie Reynolds, the actress couldn't sing that high, or they made a judgment that the actress playing Lena had a better voice for that scene. And then we can also talk about the dancing, right? The part of a musical is you have to make the dancing seem fun and entertaining and even like easy, right? If you see how hard they're working, it doesn't really work. So, for example, make him laugh when Don is sad and Cosmo tries to cheer him up. So apparently, after finishing that dance, the actor playing Cosmo had to go to the hospital for a week because he was so exhausted. And we can't tell, right? It's such an energetic and light performance. It's like he can do anything, but that does take a toll on his body. And that also ties back into how Hollywood creates an image, creates a fantasy, you can say. We all know that movies are not real life, but sometimes it's surprising how wide a gap there is between a movie and real life. Um, so things like that. And the other comments I think we've already talked about, right? The transition from silent to sound, how being a voice without a face could ruin your career. All of these are also talking about itself. Questions? Okay, so that was the fourth film. Let's talk about the midterm exam. Right. So the midterm exam will be a 1 week take home open book essay question. It will begin when the bell rings today, and it will end next Wednesday at midnight. But as we discussed earlier, I will start grading these exams before the deadline. Please do not wait until the last day to do the exam. I'm giving you 1 week just in case, but please try to finish this early. So the essay question will be one question only. It will be an open-ended question. There is no standard answer. There are wrong answers, but there is more than one right answer. So here's some rules. Your answer must be an English essay with multiple non-itemized paragraphs. English, essay, multiple paragraphs, and non-itemized. Itemized means a list. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Or bullet points, right? Dot, dot, dot. Or even subtitles. Acting, colon, blah, blah, blah. Directing, colon, blah, blah, blah. Or suffragette, colon, blah, blah, blah. Singing in the rain, colon, blah, blah, blah. Don't make a list. Please write an essay. If the question gives you options, you must choose one of the options. So if it says, do you think A or B and why? You must choose either A or B. You cannot say both A and B. You cannot say neither A nor B. You cannot say sometimes A, sometimes B. You cannot say it depends. You must choose A or B. If you do not answer the question or you answer it in the wrong format, so if you don't follow these rules, you will get only 50%. Now, the exam has a deadline, but it does not have a timer. So you can begin whenever and you can end whenever within that time period. So you can also write your answer elsewhere and copy and paste it into Moodle. You don't have to write it in Moodle. Now, when I say this, one year, one student got very creative, and instead of giving me their answer, the student gave me a link to a Google Doc with their answer. Don't do that. Please paste your actual answer into Moodle. As I mentioned, I will start grading before the deadline ends. As long as you have not yet received the grade, you can submit as many answers as you want, and I will give you the highest grade. But if you already get a grade and you submit again within the deadline, I will ignore your new answer. So if you finish early, you then have some time to think about your answer, see if maybe you forgot something, and quickly submit a new answer. The exam is open book. You can use any resource except other people, but you can ask me questions. So you can use everything on Moodle. You can go to the library. You can use the internet. You can talk to me, write me an email. You cannot talk to anybody else about this exam. You must give at least, sorry, so you can use anything on Moodle, including the films. In fact, you must use the films. I put all the films in this folder. If you want to add subtitles, you will have to download a new program. In this class, I use GOM Player. So here's a YouTube video showing you how to use GOM Player, how to add subtitles to GOM Player. I only provided Chinese subtitles, so if you need a subtitle in another language, you might have to find it yourself. Sorry. But they're all here. Okay, so those are the basic rules. Here is how I'm going to grade your exam. You must give at least 4 pieces of specific and accurate evidence from your chosen film or films that we have screened in class to explain your answer. So there will be a question, and in your answer, you have to give me evidence from the 4 movies we have seen, at least one movie. You can give 4 pieces of evidence from one movie, from 2 movies, from 3 movies, or from all 4 movies, um, as long as it's 4 pieces of evidence. And those pieces of evidence have to help explain your answer. You can't just give me 4 random pieces of information, right? They have to be connected to your answer. So again, you can use all 4 films, you can use 3 films, you can use 2 films, you can just use 1 film, but you have to have 4 pieces of evidence. If you use information from other sources, so not the films, but other information, please give me the name of the source, like the title of a book or the name of a web page, the web address if it has a web address, the page number if it has pages, or timestamp if it's a video. You don't have to give me the timestamp for the film, but if you want to use information from like a YouTube video or something, please tell me when in the video, what time in the video you find this information. And please give me the location like this right next to the information. Like, please don't finish your answer and then at the very bottom list all of the information. Don't do that. Please integrate the source of your information into your answer. So you'll say, oh, in this video, the host says blah, blah, blah. And then parentheses, link, time, parentheses, and then continue with your answer. The point is, I need to be able to figure out which piece of information comes from where. Please don't give me like a general everything, right? I need to tell which piece of information comes from where. If your information does not have a location or source next to it, it will not be counted. If I cannot tell where you found it, I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. And finally, plagiarism will earn you a 0. So if you copy from somewhere and you don't tell me the source, and I find the source and I know that you copied it, your exam grade will be 0. This includes even the smallest things. In your answer, you will probably summarize some parts of the films. Even those summaries cannot be copied. So like, don't think, oh, that's not the important point. The important point is this. Even the less important points do not copy. Okay? So those are the basic rules. Do you have questions? Yes. It has to be from at least one of the movies that we have watched in class. Yeah. Some of you are probably thinking, well, can I use ChatGPT? If you use ChatGPT to help you and your answer fits all of these rules, yes. But ChatGPT does not naturally follow these rules. You have to work to make sure you follow these rules. Other questions? Okay, let's take a look at the question. Sorry, before that. You maybe have not um, done an essay question before. If you do not have experience with essay questions, I have included some example answers to other essay questions. None of the information in here will be useful to you, but it is an example of how you can answer a question. What will it look like? And among these, this one is the bad example. This is the one that I want you not to do. Let's take a look. So first thing you'll notice, there are no page numbers, no location markers, no websites, nothing. I don't know where this person got this information. Secondly, you'll notice that it uses lists. Subject, colon, subject, colon. This is itemized. It's item by item. Don't do that. Please write it as an essay. Yeah, so those are the two main problems with this bad example. If you want a good example, you can take a look at all of these other ones. Okay, let's take a look at the exam question. First of all, this is a really big box. Don't worry about it. This is an infinite box. If you fill this box and you keep going, it will keep growing. Don't worry about filling the box. Say as much as you need to say and then stop. Here's a question. Do you think representation or critique is the better film viewing strategy for promoting gender and sexual equality? Why? So your answer has to choose either representation or critique. And your answer is depending on how to promote gender and sexual equality by watching movies. If you need a reminder, I did define representation and critique in the first week here. Okay, the rest of today, you can start thinking about this question. You can come ask me questions. Remember, you have to give evidence. It's not just what you think, but what do you see in the 4 films we have watched so far.